Welcome to AVANT Technology Insights. I'm your host, Ken Presti, Research Vice President of AVANT Research and Analytics. The link between solving business challenges and cutting-edge technologies has become tighter and more complex than ever before. In this podcast series, we delve into how enterprise decision makers can leverage SD-WAN, IT security, unified communications as a service, and a host of other SaaS opportunities towards greater operational efficiencies and higher success. We bring you the foremost experts in their respective fields to help you understand and assess the opportunities at hand. So please buckle up and let's begin. Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the show. Today on AVANT Technology Insights with Ken Presti, we kick off a series of podcasts on UCaaS. Unified Communications as a Service is a delivery model in which telephone functionality and collaboration applications and services are outsourced to a third-party provider and delivered over an IP network, typically the Internet. It's being driven by the desire to eliminate on-site hardware that requires maintenance contracts and ongoing management costs, as well as the need for redundancy to mitigate costly outages. Joining us for the discussion today is a man whose company adopted UCaaS more than 8 years ago, which is before UCaaS had completely become the cool thing. As a Chicago-based trusted advisor, Eclipse Telecom began doing UCaaS installs shortly after gaining experience with it on their own network. Fast forward to now, the company claims UCaaS as one of its core practices with more than 50,000 seats worldwide. With that kind of experience and that kind of footprint, we just had to invite their CEO and my good friend, Dave Dyson, to join us for today's episode of AVANT Technology Insights with Ken Presti. So, if I were an enterprise decision maker considering even the possibility of adopting UCaaS, I probably know a little bit in a nutshell that, it would be a phone system plus a variety of messaging features. And I think most people would know that much. But if I was looking at it that simplistically, what are some of the main things that you think I would be missing that I would really need to take into the equation in order to decide whether or not this is the right move for my company?
I'm really happy you asked that question, Ken, because that's the exact question I want to hear somebody ask me so that I could stop them in their tracks. This is not, I repeat, not switching from a PBX to the next kind of PBX. We did that when we went from traditional copper-based PBXs to VoIP, and I think a lot of folks are thinking this is the same thing. It's just the next way we're doing telephones. The reality is this: you have to think about unified communications differently. This is a platform that is going to be driving all of the business needs you have for communicating. So I'll go back to a fundamental at Eclipse. We believe that the most important thing every business does is communicate. So it's really about building the toolkit for everybody to be able to communicate as effectively as possible with all of the constituencies they work with, their coworkers, their vendors, their partners, most importantly, their customers. So it's about thinking, not do we replace that old Avaya or Cisco PBX with a new PBX from 8x8 or RingCentral, but really, let's think about how we communicate as a business. Let's think about the tools we're using to do it. Let's think about how they all need to integrate and work together. And let's think about, and this is a big one for me, let's think about gathering data and analytics on voice for the first time, potentially in some organizations, so we can measure and understand the interactions we're having with all of those constituencies that I mentioned. So I've clearly got a lot of fire for that topic because it's our job in this channel to get people out of that mindset of this is just the next upgrade of telephony. It's something much bigger and it's something much more than that.
Okay, take me a little bit deeper down that road. So we're looking at the different features involved in it and the way in which it's not just the next kind of PBX. What are some of the things I should be looking at as an enterprise decision maker that's going to turn that around for me, that's going to say, yeah, I can see bringing this into the equation or integrating this feature with another feature? What are the main things that I would be looking at from a general business point of view?
So a couple of things. We want to be thinking about this newest generation of people entering the workforce. We've talked a lot about millennials. We're talking a lot now about Gen Z entering the workforce. And this is really about giving them, again, you're going to hear me use the word toolkit a lot, giving them the toolkit that they want to use. They want to be mobile enabled or mobile first. They don't care about a phone on their desk. or a soft phone on their PC. They want to be living an Android or an iPhone life, and so we want to be enabling mobility at all turns for a highly flexible, highly mobile, work from anywhere workplace and workforce. I think the second thing is integration into the tools that most people are using to run their businesses, your Salesforce.coms, and the CRM data that drives a lot of what's happening from a sales perspective at most big organizations. A Zendesk, for instance, where we're using it to support our customers. It's a customer service platform, and tying in all of these communication tools so that, again, every interaction is recorded, analyzed, and reported against. We have to start thinking bigger than, again, I get my voicemails in my email. That's a sort of a so what feature at this point. This is beyond that. This is every single time we communicate with another human being, we're using this toolkit the business has given us, and we're getting actionable intelligence out of this. Is my call center doing a better job than my branch locations at setting appointments if I'm let's say, a dentist office chain? Is my customer converting to a higher degree, selling them something if we're talking over the phone or we're doing a web chat? So as we start to integrate all these different tools and data sets in, I think we get a much more robust picture of what's actually happening in all of our communications, and we're no longer taking any of them for granted. So it's application driven, it's integration driven, it's giving people the tools they need to work, and it's about meeting your customers where they want to be met. Again, going back to Gen I, Gen Z, millennials, etc., they want to be able to use SMS to contact you. Talk about voice as the killer app, Ken. The next gen of being able to say into my smartwatch or my Alexa, "Hey Alexa, where's my order? Hey Siri, when is my pizza showing up?" This is all coming into a platform that should be giving the customer information that they desire and require, and removing friction from the buying and the customer being process within any company.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is this emphasis on the information that you're able to track, the data that you're able to get. So the next logical question, which you could probably anticipate, is help me connect the dots between what you just said and the ability to make my business not only more communicative, but also more competitive and more closely aligned with the bottom line.
Yeah, that's the exact right next question. And this is one of those things where we believe that unified communication and cloud contact center solutions absolutely are driving measurable business value and outcomes for the businesses that are doing this. It is creating competitive advantage, both from a toolkit and an efficiency perspective, but also from that data tracking and analytics perspective. When we understand how our customers are communicating, we're removing problems quickly. We're anticipating customers and their needs well before they even call. And I always, in these exercises, Ken, with customers, encourage you or anybody listening here to think about the last time you had a great customer service interaction, whether it was calling an airline or an insurance claim or whatever the case may be, where you called and they didn't ask you for your identifying information 5 times. They knew who you were. They had a pretty good idea why you were calling, and it just felt like they had your best interest in mind, and they solved your problem or your inquiry or your question quickly. And you walked away saying, "Well, that was really painless, and I was expecting to get transferred 7 times and to have to re-explain myself each and every one of those 7 times." So while you're removing friction from the customer experience, what you're also doing is creating tons of efficiency internal to the company, where you don't necessarily need to have as much staff, where you can focus on having experts, because again, you're getting very good at getting people to the right people within your organization to sell them the thing they want to buy or to solve the customer service problem that they have. So it's no more of a guessing game. It's no more the transfer around and hope for the best that maybe you get that one person who gives a rip and is trying to help you. This is really about anticipatory behavior that drives revenue, that drives CSAT, that drives net promoter score. And when we put these solutions in to organizations that are very customer centric, they start measuring this stuff and they see that net promoter score go up. They see the customer satisfaction scores go up. And most importantly, they're going to see that revenue and add on sale revenue go up because they're getting smarter about how they communicate.
So, where's the differentiation in this? Is it differentiation by technology and feature set, or is it more along the lines of, what the contract looks like? I mean, I guess if all the features and benefits were effectively the same as you go from one provider to another, it comes down to what the contract looks like and the terms around that. Are we at that point with this particular technology, or are you seeing a lot more differentiation on the technology side?
You're gonna get us both in trouble with that question, and here's why. Because I'm here to say that even though this space is new and exciting, 97% of all of it is commoditized at this point. The feature sets are similar, and because these are software-driven solutions, Ken, if provider A comes out with a whiz bang new feature today that somehow sets them apart, within 3 months, everybody else will have that feature because that's the nature of the game we're playing right now. You're also talking to somebody who feels it's a really good thing that this stuff is commoditizing because we're getting into what's important to the customer, the product sets that are working and driving value. And now we're competing on things like flexibility, customer service, contracts, pricing schemas, rollouts, implementation, all of the stuff that we know actually matters in this space. So, a lot of people would argue till they were blue in the face with me on that point that like their stuff is the best stuff. It's all very good. All of the leaders in the space are excellent. The technology is all very sophisticated. The back ends are engineered flawlessly in the cloud. High availability, highly reliable. So when we get past all those sort of table stakes issues, are there any technology differentiators? Once in a while, you find a killer use case that one platform has the one thing that this one customer needs. But in general, it's really about finding fit, and there tends to be multiple providers who can fit any given use case. We do get into some interesting conversations. For instance, if somebody's very global in nature, that certainly shrinks the playing field. Not everybody is built their fabric out on a global basis as well as others. So there is some nuance, and it's why having an advisor like an Eclipse is really critical for the end customer. So we can help navigate some of cut through some of the sales BS of the companies who provide this technology, and just say, yeah, listen, you guys have sites in 38 countries. The guys you're talking to are not the exact right fit for you, but these guys over here are exceptional globally. Outside of some nuances like that, if you're just saying I've got 10 locations in the US, and I just need the telephony, the messaging, and some of the features and the integrations into Salesforce. There's a heck of a lot of people who can do it. And I, for one, think the rapid commoditization is fantastic because what it's doing is driving enterprise adoption. When we started doing these deals at Eclipse, kind of in the enterprise space, 7 years ago, we were winning big deals in UCaaS at 200, 300 seats. Nobody would bat an eye at that right now. That's a laughably small deal in the current environment. So, now we're hearing of deals going out at 5, 10, 15, and 1,000 seats, and you're going to start seeing things get bigger and bigger as that commoditization continues and that price pressure continues.
Okay, so as I'm sitting here with my enterprise decision maker hat on and listening to what you just said, I'm in here thinking, okay, great. This is a race to the bottom because if all the features and benefits are basically the same, it comes down to the contract. Maybe there's more to it than that. If you were in my shoes as that enterprise decision maker, what are the main things that you would be looking at in terms of deciding who you're going to go with?
Well, it's interesting right now because there's a couple of arguments I would make. One is look at the technology stack of a given provider. Have they built their own stuff natively from the ground up, or have they cobbled together a series of solutions and packaged it as something that maybe is working? The second thing is, I hate to say it, but momentum matters in technology. And, when you look at, I'll pick on the UCaaS space, you look at the Gartner Magic Quadrant leaders, they have a lot of momentum right now. Um, do they have the best technology? That's the argument. Maybe yes, maybe no, but the momentum matters a lot. I'd like to see, based on particularly the publicly traded companies, but even if somebody isn't publicly traded, I want to see a very heavy investment in research and development. I want to see them adding new feature sets. One of the values of UCaaS over premise based stuff that we know about is this perpetual upgrade cycle that exists. And the reason that exists is because these guys are able to listen to the marketplace, listen to the customers, develop on the fly, and continue to make these solutions better and more robust, release after release after release. Whereas in the old way, if you wanted that cool next three features you needed from Avaya, it was a huge license upgrade. Maybe you had to buy some more hardware. So I'm looking for research and development within the companies. Are they spending aggressively and robustly on R&D? And I think you want to sort of look at the the leadership of these companies. Are they trying to move the companies up market? Are they trying to solve bigger and bigger problems? And I think, again, with some of the leaders in the space, you've seen them, moving aspirationally up into the bigger and bigger enterprises, trying to solve bigger and more complex problems, and then doing it successfully. So, I guess last piece, and this is where your trusted advisor network comes in, your Eclipse type company. You want to talk to people who've actually implemented this stuff, because the devil is in those details. And if you're putting in 2,000 stations of this across 100 locations of your business, you want to know that that's going to go well. That's still the hardest part. That'll never not be. It's telecom, for Pete's sake, and we know it's hard. So let's make sure that we have not just a bunch of sales promises. There's obviously the organizations that have the best sales forces. They do win a lot, but you want to get those day two stories. How is implementation going? How is ongoing customer support? How's the billing? Is your billing clean? Is it good? Is it healthy? Does it make sense? Is it billing the way you said it would? So these are all things that if I'm an enterprise buyer, I want to dig into with somebody who has that data set and somebody who's been through it before.
So here's the thing that scares the heck out of me. Okay, if I'm looking at buying into this, on the one hand, my telephone system, my PBX, if I've got that now, or my IP PBX, as it were, I've got a lot depending on that. If something gets screwed up in the migration, I've got a huge problem on my hands. I'm going to lose money, and there's going to be a lot of people asking me why I allowed this to happen. That terrifies me on one side. On the other side, it is also possible for me to not do anything with this, to remain, wrapped around a PBX or a key system or whatever I'm using that I've been using for the last 10 to 12 years. And now suddenly that thing goes down at a time when I should have made a migration, and now I've got to account for that. Can you help me unpack, from the buyer's standpoint, how to sort that out and to know which way is the right way to go?
Yeah, a couple of good rules of thumb here, Ken. One is, if you are buying your spare parts for your existing premise-based solution from eBay, it's a good time to make a change. You're already engineering risk into the business. And I'm not saying that as a laugh line. I'm saying that as a guy who's seen it enough times to know that it's happening out in the world, out in the marketplace.
Right.
Uh, Similarly, if you've got a guy and he's been working on your PBX for 22 years, and he comes in and he's 60 something and he's got his toolkit on and he knows all of the programming and the vectors and what's where and what plugs into what and which wire goes where, but he's the only guy in the whole wide world who knows that, you have a business risk. You should think about starting to mitigate and migrate away. But the reality is this: you can stay with what you have right now. And this is the danger with voice services as they exist today. You can stay where you are. You can do the status quo thing, and you're going to be fine for a while, and then you're going to wake up one day and you're not going to be fine. And that's the way technology works. It's fine until it's not. And what I would pay attention to if I was an enterprise right now, or an enterprise buyer, or a C-level decision maker in a big company, or a small one for that matter, I'd be looking at what the people who make this technology are saying. The legacy premise guys have thrown up the white flag. They have surrendered and said, premise is dead. It's a matter of how quickly we can get rid of it. And this is Mitel, this is Avaya, this is Cisco saying it. The cloud guys have always said premise was dead, let's go cloud. But now you have everybody else coming on board, and you're going to see a generational shift over the next 3 to 5 years. You don't want to be the last 5, 10, 15% on the old technology when the entire world has moved away from it.
Right.
Never mind, the new stuff does more. And that goes back to my first point in this conversation today, Ken, that you're not just getting a new telephone on your desk. That might be part of it. you're getting an entire new toolkit to drive business and remove friction from every business interaction you have. So this is really the time to be thinking about it. And you don't have to take a dynamite plunger to it, but you do have to start thinking about your plan and your roadmap from getting where you are today, if you're on legacy equipment, to where you need to go tomorrow, which is this highly integrated toolkit that works with all of the other aspects of your technology environment. So yeah, I think it's a big thing to kick that status quo in the pants a little bit, because if you sit on that, eventually it's going to feel like it's not a problem, and then one day it's going to be a problem, and you're going to be in a crisis mode, and nobody wants to act out of panic or crisis.
And with that in mind, it all comes down to the underlying network underneath it. You can have so many panics and crises, depending on what's running underneath it. How do I assess my network readiness around this, and not just at my main complex, not just at headquarters? Let's say I've got a distributed workforce. I've got people working in other offices, and they may have different types of, interfaces that they're connecting with. I've got some people working out of their homes, and God knows what they've got. How do I know that UCaaS is going to be able to meet all these needs? And if it doesn't, how do I know what I'm going to need to do to fix that and make it all work?
Yeah, great question. And there's a couple of things that have happened over the time we at Eclipse have been doing unified communications. So thing number one is the network has gotten bigger and more robust. Ethernet has become widely available. When we started doing this 8, 9 years ago, we were still talking about T1 1.5 megabit size networks. Everybody everywhere is putting in 100 meg gigabit style circuits. You look at, in conjunction with that, what's happened on the what I'll call the low retail end of business, with broadband from the likes of Comcast, FiOS from Verizon, AT&T, Uverse, these high speed connections that everybody has in their home and in their small business or small locations has certainly enabled UCaaS as well. And then the big one we love talking about, and I know AVANT does too. SD-WAN is. I should trademark these things sometimes. Kind of 5 years ago, I put in a paper. I called them peanut butter and jelly, SD-WAN and UCaaS, both phenomenal on their own. Together, it's absolute magic. If you do a software defined wide area network, you have enabled unified communications to work so cleanly and elegantly from a cloud provider. So you have this underlying network, but it's absolutely critical that your advisor and your team as an enterprise are looking at your network first, understanding what's there, understanding where the weak points or the flaws might be, and then working around that and starting to figure out how to bolster the things that need bolstering. But the network has come around. And the last one, again, which is probably the most interesting. 8 years ago, the internet was a little bit scary, right? You're going to put voice on the internet? That's really scary. We've all stopped being afraid of that. We have mobile networks now that are streaming, at 4 and 5G speeds. We've come to not expect as much from our voice calls, unfortunately, Ken, with the proliferation of mobile phones over the last couple of decades. And as I always say, we went from "you can hear a pin drop" to "can you hear me now?" And
Right.
we sort of prepared ourselves for a degraded experience. But in the meantime, and this goes back to the R&D dollar conversation with the UCaaS guys in particular, they have spent a lot of money getting this stuff to work on leaner and leaner bandwidth, and it's in that sort of mode now where it just works. Right, we're in an era where you and I can be doing this interview remotely, over Wi-Fi networks or what have you. We could be doing it over like a FaceTime on our iPhones. We could be doing it as a Skype meeting. So the bandwidth is there. It's definitely one of those things we want to check off on the early part of these investigations of doing this stuff to make sure the network is healthy enough to support this and maintain it. But it's a lot easier than it was 6, 7, 8 years ago when the network speeds were nowhere near what they are right now.
And what about the integration piece of it? How easy is this to integrate with my other cloud applications like my Office 365 or my CRM? You were talking about that as part of the main value to be able to bring all this stuff together. How difficult is it to make that happen?
That is actually relatively easy for many of the providers in the ecosystem of UCaaS and CCaaS, Cloud Contact Center. They have natively built their platforms to be open to integration with the modern platforms people are using to run their business. O365 is certainly one of those. The entire world is moving towards it, if not already there. Salesforce is one of those. Your unified communications or cloud contact center company would not do very well if they weren't integrating with the leading software providers out in the world. And when you look at the APIs that are just available and open from any of these guys, a Ring Central, an InContact, an 8x8, a Fuse, these guys have APIs to dozens and dozens of platforms. And then what we've done a bunch over the years is if a customer has something specific to them, an industry specific CRM, for instance, or an in house CRM system that they've written themselves. In general, you can even write connectivity into some of that stuff and build some of the hooks in. I'm not a software developer, so I don't want to call any of it easy, lest I ruffle any feathers. But it's relatively intuitive. This stuff is all set up to work with other stuff. It's these are not closed platforms. They're not provincial. They work very well with other softwares that are running your business. So I think that's one of the key selling points overall.
Excellent, excellent. So let me ask you my basically my look out for this question. From if you were talking to an enterprise decision maker about UCAS right now, and you had to give him one thing, or maybe two things, if that would be easier, what are the main things that you would say? Okay, when you do this, when you get ready for it, make sure that you do this, or make sure that you don't do that. What would be your main counsel here?
So a couple of things. The sales people who work at these organizations are incented and motivated to sell the product, and that's fine because that's their job. And we love salespeople. They're out in the world doing what they do, but they're not helping the customer generally aggregate all of the data that's necessary on day one to lead to a successful implementation. So let me just walk you through it. Again, the process from an Eclipse. When we're engaged with the customer, we're gathering important data that we know is going to be necessary for the project. Phone numbers, user lists, call flows, all of these things that go into making up a solution. And we're gathering and we're documenting all of that data up front so that when the customer signs the agreement with the underlying provider, we're turning all that data over and it doesn't start the clock on day one where we now burn 4 to 6 weeks of implementation time just gathering data. So that's thing number one. The other big one that gets missed in sales processes, UCAS in particular, has extraordinarily high taxes and fees associated to it. And if I'm a customer and I'm just looking at the price, $20 per widget, and I budget for that because most big organizations function, on a budgetary cycle. They're getting approval for budgets, and you think you have it all licked, and then the actual bill shows up and it's 20 or 30 or 40% higher than you budgeted for. You're going to have a really bad day going to explain that to your CFO. So get the overall financial modeling done correctly. And again, this is where an advisor, an Eclipse style company really comes in handy. We understand what the total cost of ownership is on this stuff. We're going to show you the entire out the door price, not the sticker price. And so I think that's really important. And I think there's a lot of horror stories out there of people who miss their budget forecasts by 30, 40%, simply because no one in the sales process was talking about things like cost recovery fees and all of the municipal and state and federal taxes that get associated to some of this stuff. And I think we all know taxes are a part of life. Anyone who's paid a telecom bill sees taxes all over it, personal or professionally. And but not budgeting for it can be a relatively catastrophic thing for a large enterprise engagement. So just make sure you're looking out for that stuff.
That's a huge piece of advice right there because it's so easy to look at just what the contract terms are that those other line items tend to slip through the cracks. And you got to look at it from the standpoint not just of what that contract looks like, but of your total cost of ownership. So that's outstanding advice. Dave Dyson, CEO of Eclipse Telecom, I want to thank you very much for being our guest here today. You shed a lot of light on UCaaS, Unified Communications as a Service, and we appreciate your time in doing so. Thank you, buddy.
Thanks so much for having me, Ken.
You've been listening to AVANT Technology Insights, featuring information and opinions on how key technologies can be leveraged to solve business problems. AVANT Technology Insights is a service of AVANT Communications, a platform for IT decision-making. All opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the guests and the host. For more information, please feel free to download our research reports and other resources at www.goavant.net. That's www.goavant.net. For AVANT Research and Analytics, this is Ken Presti.